So while I was researching a recent video, I came across this old map of the Circle Line. Wikipedia thinks it dates from the 1880s, but Wikipedia thinks all sorts of things. Regardless, something obvious that jumps out about this map is the number of stations with unfamiliar names. What happened to Bishopsgate? Or Gower Street? Or Aldersgate? So basically, long story short, I thought it might be interesting to look at all the stations on the Circle Line that have had a name change over the years, because there's a lot. Of course, the first thing we need to point out is that the Circle Line itself has had a name change. It used to be known as the Inner Circle. The big problem with the Circle is that it has no logical starting point. Let's start at Baker Street and work our way clockwise, shall we? Baker Street was the first station to open under the Metropolitan Railway in 1863. The first station we come to is Great Portland Street. This opened as Portland Road on the 10th of January 1863. It became Great Portland Street in 1917. Then, in 1923, it changed to Great Portland Street and Regent's Park, which is a bit of a mouthful, so it changed back to Great Portland Street in 1933. Next is Euston Square, which was originally Gower Street. North Gower Street by the station was used in some kids' TV programme a few years back. Sheer luck, something like that. Anyway, the station was renamed in 1909. It's the closest station on the Circle Line to Euston, and in fact there are plans afoot to put a subway link into the big station, as part of the larger rebuilding works. Would it make sense to rename it to Euston? Good question. King's Cross St Pancras used to be just plain old King's Cross when it opened in 1863. In 1933 it was renamed King's Cross St Pancras. Except for the bit on the Metropolitan and Circle lines, which was located further east than it is now. In 1940, the Metropolitan and Circle bit was relocated and renamed in accordance with the rest of the station. Farringdon started out as Farringdon Street. In 1922, it was renamed Farringdon and High Holborn, which you can still see on the station building. And in 1936, it took the present name. Barbican was opened as Aldersgate Street in 1865. In 1910, it became just plain Aldersgate. In 1924, Aldersgate and Barbican. And in 1968, the Aldersgate part was scrapped and it took the name we know and love. Next up, Moorgate. Or should I say, Moorgate Street, for 'twas the name under which the station opened in 1865, as part of an extension to the Metropolitan Railway. In 1924, the name was shortened to its current form. Now, Liverpool Street is an odd one. When the Metropolitan Railway first ran here in 1874, it used the main line station. Then in 1875, they opened their own station, which was named Bishopsgate. This is kind of confusing, because there was another freight-only station called Bishopsgate, which is in fact where Shoreditch High Street Station is now. In 1909, Bishopsgate Underground Station became Liverpool Street. Aldgate has always been Aldgate, so the next stop is Tower Hill, and this is really confusing because there have in fact been 3 stations here. One was called Tower of London, opened by the Metropolitan Railway in 1882. In 1884, the District Railway opened a station slightly to the west, named Mark Lane. That same year, Tower of London closed. In 1946, Mark Lane was renamed Tower Hill. And in 1967 it was closed and a new station was built in the current location, which is where Tower of London Station used to be. Next up, Monument. As you may be aware, Monument is the name used for the District and Circle Line platforms at this station. Everything else is Bank. Now, I covered the many name changes at Bank and Monument in a separate video, but in 1884 Monument opened under the name Eastcheap. Later that year it was renamed to The Monument. I'm not exactly clear when they dropped the, but by the late 1880s maps were calling it just Monument. There are fewer name changes along the southern part of the route. I'm going to suggest that that's because it was constructed later and they had a more solid idea of what they wanted from an underground railway, i.e. a commuter line to serve the mainline termini that already existed. On the northern part, as we've already seen, you got a lot of stations that served mainline termini but had completely different names, whereas south, on the whole, the underground stations were usually named after the mainline stations they served. That being said, I should mention Blackfriars, which flips the whole thing on its head. The underground station came first, opening in 1870. The mainline station opened in 1886 under the name St Paul's. In 1937 it was renamed to Blackfriars to reflect the underground station. Temple opened in 1870 as The Temple. No one seems to know when it just became Temple, but everyone agrees that it happened pretty early on. And next we come to another exception to the rule about southern circle stations being consistent. Embankment opened as Charing Cross in 1870, which is the main line terminus in whose shadow it sits. Once again, the naming situation at this station is complex enough to have had its own video, but the Circle and District bit was renamed to Charing Cross Embankment in 1974, and 2 years later it was shortened to Embankment. In 1868, Westminster was opened under the name of Westminster Bridge, which it sits next to. In 1907 it was officially renamed Westminster. That's because of the opening of the Bakerloo station, Lambeth North, which in those days was called Westminster Bridge Road. The next stop is St James's Park, and oh boy, this is one for the pedants. So when it was opened in 1868, the station was just known as St James Park. In 1951 it became St James's Park. I'll let you argue in the comments section over which one is correct, although I should mention that a lot of London transport literature from the 30s through to the 50s just called it St James Park with no apostrophe at all. And I should also mention that there's still an old roundel on the eastbound platform with the original name. Gloucester Road was originally Brompton Gloucester Road, and it was another 1868 opening. It took its current name in 1907 when the Piccadilly line station opened right next door. Interestingly though, some earlier maps give the name as Gloucester Road. Generally, I have to say that I get the impression that a few of these stations were already known by their current names before they were officially so called. I guess for the sake of completeness I should point out that Gloucester Road often shows up on early maps with an abbreviated spelling. Bayswater was Bayswater at the very start, again opening in 1868. By 1908 it was listed on the map as Bayswater Queen's Road. Then in 1926 it gained the unwieldy name of Bayswater Queen's Road and Westbourne Grove. In 1933 it became Bayswater Queen's Road again. In 1946 it was shortened further to Bayswater Queensway. Queensway is of course the name of the nearby Central Line station just a couple of minutes up the road on foot, and at some point in the late 40s it became known as regular old Bayswater. Although again, there's some inconsistency. The famous Harry Beck map of 1933 just says Bayswater. You see the kind of nonsense I have to put up with. Next is Paddington, which was opened as Paddington Praed Street, but usually appeared on maps as just Praed Street. Is it pronounced Praed Street, or is it Pride Street? Or Preed Street? These are the questions that keep me awake at night. Anyway, it was called that to avoid confusion with the Metropolitan Railway station nearby, which was Paddington Bishop's Road. It didn't become just Paddington until 1948. To be honest, I find the arrangement of underground stations at Paddington very confusing, and I honestly think there's a case to be made for some form of differentiation. But maybe that's just me. Edgware Road never changed its name, and that brings us back to Baker Street and the end of our... What? Well, when did that happen? Oh, fine. I'm informed that apparently the Circle Line goes all the way out to Hammersmith these days. I guess I'm heading west then. So next up, the other Paddington station, the one that was built by the Metropolitan Railway in 1863. As I say, that was originally Bishop's Road. In 1933, the year that the Metropolitan Railway became part of the Underground, it became Paddington. To be honest, I find the arrangement of underground stations at... No, wait, I've already done that bit. The next station to change its name is Ladbroke Grove, which was Notting Hill on its opening in 1864. The name was a gradual evolution. In 1880 it was renamed Notting Hill and Ladbroke Grove. Then in 1919, Ladbroke Grove, North Kensington. And finally, Ladbroke Grove in 1938. Shepherd's Bush Market was Shepherd's Bush until 2008, when it was renamed to avoid confusion with the Overground station. Is that all of them? I think that's all of them. Let me know in the comments section if I missed any. I'm off to bed. I hope you enjoyed this nominally uncertain tale from the tube. I honestly thought this was going to be a really quick video. I guess I underestimated the number of changes there have been. That being said, I might even make a series like this. There's been a heck of a lot of name changes on the network over the years. Let me know if that's something that would be interesting to you. Thanks as always to the donors on Ko-fi and Patreon. You are the circle line to my mainline termini. And I'll see you all again very soon for another tale from the tube.